Alex is no stranger to taking extremely complicated subjects and subjects that are not instantly, that are not instantly going to lend themselves to a movie screen, and figuring out how to make them speak.
Look, my hope is that as many people will see this as possible. That if it gets good reviews and people are drawn to it, because I think it's an issue of extreme national importance. But I do think that the experience of the film is meant to take you into a place that that makes you inhabit some of these issues in both an intellectual but also a visceral way. I worried about it a lot, and it was actually a practical concern in the evolving cuts. I mean, I can explain in a couple of instances why I did, we actually built Dilowar's cell. We had photographs of it, and we built Dilowar's cell, and we used people to reenact some, the knee strikes. And the reason I did that was because I felt, in the kind of very bland retelling of what this technique was by some of the guards, it was hard to get a palpable sense of how you could do so much damage to somebody's legs, by just doing this over and over and over again. But I tried to make it clear in the way we did it that this was not pretending to be real. There was always a distinction between what was done. And of course, I also included for that reason these shots of the Army recreations themselves, which I labeled as such. So there's different levels. I mean, they were recreating the events as well. But I think to some extent it was done to create an impression that you couldn't do otherwise. I decided on him because in looking for a story to tell, what was interesting about the Dilawar story was that he was a man who was palpably innocent. He was a guy who was brought in much earlier than the big scandal we all know about, which is Abu Ghraib. And his story encompassed everything having to do with the system. There are only 2 images of Dilawar. Well, no, there's 4 images of Dilawar. 2 that were taken by his family. One is a young child. One, the shot you see over and over again of him by the rock pot where he used to bring the rocks down. And then 2, entry images, mugshots that the Army took. So it was extremely hard to get that palpable sense. And, his brother and his father, in a funny way, saw him in a very spiritual way and were not able to be as concrete in a way as I might have liked about exactly who he was and what kinds of things he did as a young kid. So I would have liked to have spent a little bit more time learning and understanding Dilawar and presenting it, but we were vexed in some ways in terms of what we had available to us. We made some fantastic discoveries. We actually found, I had to fly to Texas to meet with a lawyer to get a copy of a CD that contained not only the images of Dilawar and this guy Habibullah who were brought in, but also these images of the guards performing these recreations of what happened as part of the investigation, and indeed the only images I know of inside Bagram. It's mentioned a little bit in the film, but this whole notion of habeas corpus. I know Eugene is doing a lot of work about this now. This habeas corpus. You show the body. The idea that when it comes time to determine guilt or innocence, somebody has to stand in a courtroom. The body has to be there, so you can determine whether this person has been, in effect, given due process. This goes all the way back to the Magna Carta, as many of you know better than I. For me, one of the most telling occurs late in the film when I think John McCain asks Alberto Gonzalez if, under the new law, abusive, degrading, and inhumane treatment would be acceptable. And Gonzalez miraculously is unprepared for the question. And you can see him sitting there for almost 30 seconds in silence, grasping for words to try to come up with some lie to cover his tracks. And then he says by the end, well, I think it depends on what the definition is, which is the perfect answer, because that's what they've done. They've redefined everything.